I think I'd like to open this up to more people to respond to a lot of the stuff that's been brought up, because a lot of stuff has been brought up. I think to sort of like maybe to provide a specific channel for that, I'd have to say that I 100% agree with Reese that just very broadly, just shut up. Very broadly, like critiquing an institution because it is an institution, like there is a risk there of like ignoring the really vital work to maintain that, like the massive fight that goes into making sure that these institutions, which have not been around forever, continue to exist. I'd like to ask how people would see balancing the necessity for the continuation of the fight for these institutions with like the necessity to engage with them in a critical manner. Like, how is this possible in a situation, in a broader social situation, where there are very powerful forces that would like to shut this down and turn it into a business school?
Yeah. Well, it was like, I felt like a bit, you know, like being here in the middle, it's, yeah, I absorbed that energy, and I'm going with the same vibe now to make a statement. No, no, I think it's, I don't know, it's quite interesting to see to whom you're giving the opportunity to educate themselves, because it's about how you can articulate here your discourse with your practice. So in this sense, like people coming from abroad, like I'd like to see this opportunity as I'm taking this that I deserve. You know, like the capitalist system have turned countries such as mine as like, oh, you are so out of the discussion because you're not good enough. So for me, this opportunity is about how I can take it into subverting it and the problem of like how do I merge myself into the capitalist art world, or how can I empower myself and take the knowledge that I can create and generate here in order to share it with other people. That I think this is crucial, this is quite important, because lots of people are coming here and yes, it's not that we are receiving any dogmatic education. I hope that we are conscious enough to generate our own discourses and to articulate ourselves enough to be like responsive for what we want to push for. So I think like also this matter of whether I go for selling myself or whatever it's called, I think there's nothing wrong with being a good artist and earning money, and like how to sell yourself and how to market yourself. We should also learn it and actually pull for it, because I don't see anything like, no, now I'm in this capitalist machine of, and I don't want to do it. We can create different ways of collaborating each other, generate different systems of like how we can exchange not only knowledge, but also like how can we create and develop systems that can be, I don't know, quite helpful to one another, like taking care of our friend's kids because she's working and I can like help with this, like very particular things that we can actually create new platforms of economies. It's not just about money, it's about how we can actually manage time, because this is like the biggest commodity now. And yeah, I think like I don't have any problem with like actually owning what my knowledge is, and be able to say like, hey, this is knowledge, and you don't have to buy it, but it's good enough for me, and it's good enough, I think, for an overall, you know, like how can we see what we do actually as something that we can live from too? Like, why couldn't this beautiful garment be sold in like thousands of dollars if if Mariana wants now, you know?
Can we have a close-up on the...
Yeah, please, can we...
I think the worm actually wanted to say something earlier.
Oh, is that what...
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
This is your chance to say something.
Okay. So, I think, well, from this very warmly point of...
You start again. We'll edit
Say that
out.
again.
What do you mean?
Just start again.
It was the camera fell, so we want to get everything that you say.
It doesn't matter if I'm in the camera or not. You can just put the sound. Anyway, going back to what you were saying, it's just, even be you a student or a worm, or when you are in the institution, as we're talking about the institution, I just think that sometimes we forget that we also become it. So when you were asking how can we be in it but still at least look at it critically in a certain sense, I just feel that a lot of times we criticize it and we go against it, but we forget that maybe we can propose things. And when we're here doing a master's or a BA, like maybe we don't think we have time or agency, but maybe we have more than we think we do. So in a way, I always ask the question, like looking at everything that's going around and listening, like how can then we do it also from the inside and actually like propose things or go, yeah, like get together and talk about what it is that is aggravating us so much, and maybe try to change it both inside the institution as well as outside. Like if we had more time and maybe if we had more space for discussing and getting together and talking about these things, maybe, as Agatha said, it's super hard then if everybody is like running around and fleeing from the place. Because they have work, you can't really be together and talk. What if, like, from within the institution, while we are here, we could also get together and talk about other ways of doing or other ways of staying together or thinking together after we are out? I don't know, maybe it's a bit utopian, but it's really how to also use the institution to think about other modes of doing for when we are out of it, and using it as a lab and a place to actually maybe foster and some kind of trust in each other and people. I don't know, I wonder if that's also the point of artistic education, making you trust enough that you don't have to give a shit afterwards. And you can just like, okay, I'll do what I'll do. Even if I got a bad grade, I'll keep doing my shit. Maybe that's also the point of it. So how can that also keep going after the institutional time is done? And maybe I asked too many questions at once, but yeah, that's what the worm had to say.
If I could just have the camera up here. We have very naturally segued into the final point of this evening, which is saw point.
Ow!
Saw point is where we ask the difficult questions this evening. I think we're already in there. Before we transition to ask what transition, we were kind of already doing it. But Mahosi, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just from listening around, I often end up with questions, and one of the questions that I have now, just to throw in the room, not to anyone in particular, is then who is responsible for whom? Is that grammatically correct?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Thanks. Because I'm hearing as the conversations are going around that it seems to be you walk into Hatziti and then it's an institution and you have this time and you're creating in this time, but it seems to sound as if it's the whirlwind or the life exists within the program. Does something change when you walk off of the property, especially given that a lot of artists portray life in performance? Nina Simone said that an artist needs to portray the times of her life. Do not quote me on that, but I think she said something like that. But so I'm just wondering if there is a separation, if there is a rift between the institution and as you walk onto the street, and to what extent do they overlap, or do they ever overlap, or are they not allowed to overlap, or should they overlap, or how are they overlapping? It's like 7 questions. Lay them.
My dear classmate, in relation to your question that you've just put forward, and the previous one about valuing the institution at the same time as critiquing it, I think I think this ties into what we were saying earlier about the relational quality of the institution. So, as Mariana the Worm was saying, we are the co-contributors to the program while we're in it. So how we value the program is dependent or related to the values that are precious to us as artists that are creating. But I hear time and time again within this institution a term that's known as the bubble. So people speak about the bubble here. And then it's like, how do you understand the difference between the bubble and the real world? I mean, not that they should be completely separate, because they're coexisting. It's just, I kind of feel like if it's like, you know, you hear this analogy, if you could choose 7 people to be at a table to have a dinner with of people that have died, who would you have dinner with? And you choose the characters that you most respect or admire, I don't know, like whoever the people are that you're curious about. Like, the field is very broad, but the relational quality, I think, is very vital to the program and to its vitality and to its value and to the contribution that it can make to the world in a social kind of light. But yeah, it's kind of knowing what it is, because Florian, you were saying that some people don't know what they want to do, and that's true, that we're searching sometimes to what is it that I want to do, or what is it that I want to communicate with every project that we have that's starting afresh, as Make was saying. And what did I want to relate that to, that comment? This will probably be an edit out moment too. No, just basically like the field. You have to cultivate something, bring it to the dinner table. You have to make your dish, you all get together, eat your dinner. It's my philosophical spin on it, and this being a... Yes? Agatha, go.
I would like to add something to that, that the fact that we treat many times study time as a bubble, it's also something that we do. Yeah. Because there's this kind of saying that when you're studying, you have a right to make mistakes and you're preparing yourself for the real world, and then when you go, you are doing the perfect performances. That shouldn't be like this. I mean, we have a right all the time to. I don't find artistic practice as something that goes in diagonal, and with every performance, I'm getting better. With every performance or every practice, I'm getting different. Definitely. I'm getting different points of view, and maybe I'm expanding the horizon of my or palette of my practices or my tools, but not necessary. And I know that also art market puts on us this pressure that we have to do perfect things and we have no rights to mistake. But to a certain degree, I think we are also confirm this idea of understanding that it should be perfect. It shouldn't. Every time is different. And
I mean, because my other thing is that when you say the art market puts the pressure on us, does it though? Or do you decide that it's putting the pressure? Or do people decide to feed that pressure? Because often when there is that switch, when somebody decides to put people in a white box and they're busy walking across the room and then sitting down, then suddenly if people go, yes, we agree that this is art, that person decided to do something different. So who's defining these spaces that people are selling their art in or creating for?
I think it's 50-50. I think we meet halfway, and I think it's also in our hands as a freelancers to also understand our position and also what we can do in this position. I don't think that we always need to wait for the institution, for the theaters to come to us, to propose to us, etc. I think we also have a certain agency to a certain degree that we should more and more define for ourselves and see what our moves are.
I very much agree with that. I think, like, I work normally in a situation that's very similar to the one that you described in, like, a few decades ago, where you put on something, or is there even commercial theatre? But like where you put something on, you deal with the financial precarity that comes from that. Like in drag, when you put on an event, you like curate a couple of performers that you think are interesting, and like what you do is very much informed by how much it is, how many people you think you can get there. But I think like the basic agreement with the idea that that the state is going to be funding the arts is that how many people go to see something isn't necessarily the best guarantor for how much worth it has. So like worth, like we're talking worth in a capitalist economy, worth in some sort of like abstract, like idea of like worthy art, like taking place in this like romantic history or something like that. But I think this is, to bring this back to something that Reese said about the taxpayer, is that that there is not a difference between an artist and a taxpayer, or a student and a taxpayer. Everyone pays tax unless they don't earn enough money to feed into this system, which we can generally agree is a better idea, that if you have less money, then this is what you do. So I wonder, like, to guide it back into something that I was talking about before, like when we're fighting for the existence of like a publicly funded arts education, a publicly funded free scene, a publicly funded any sort of like the arts. Like I come from a country like Reese where the arts don't get anywhere near as much funding as they do in many countries in Europe, and so like it's quite surprising to me when I meet artists who aren't famous but who can live from their work. This is not a thing that exists everywhere. I wonder if it's the most effective argument to say that we are lucky to have what we are having, or whether we should be making further arguments about why it is that it is necessary and justifiable that this stuff is funded. Because actually what happens in a situation, and this is the situation where I usually work, is that if you want to survive from doing something, and like in order to actually put enough energy into something to make it really good, I can say from experience you need to get a bit of money from it so that you can justify dedicating a significant proportion of your life to it. Then actually, like when you're left to the forces of the market, in a situation like drag, especially when like the people who are funding this are people who are economically marginalized, maybe less so now than they were beforehand, then like there's you're kind of left to the ravages of that. And it means that the people who are going to be able to make work are the people who are making the most relatable work. So it's already going to be like discriminating against minorities, or people who make work that's only interesting to like a smaller group of people. So I'm more interested in how it is that we make this argument that this work should be funded, and whether it's useful or not to be saying thank you for finally giving me something that I don't deserve. I feel like as a representative, like as an unelected representative of the queer and trans community, I'm not going to enter an institution and say thank you for finally getting my slice of the pie. Like queer people, out queer people and trans people have been systematically shut out of cultural institutions for a very long time. It's a very recent event that someone like me, whose only performance experience comes from drag, gets to be at a university studying and doing drag. And like, especially because of that, I'm not going to really say thank you for that, This should have been happening for the entire time. Like, yes, it's great that this has been happening for people, that these people have had access to these institutions for a long time, and that should continue and that should be furthered. But people like me should have had access to these the whole time. But the fact remains that an important part of a drag performer's artistic practice is not getting bashed up on the way to a gig. So we're not sort of like, this is why I'm interested in sort of broadening this conversation out to like the social and political forces that are happening outside of this, which is something that what Reese was speaking about when you're talking about how it is to maintain this like this institution in the face of opposition. I think is a step towards that. Like how is it that how do we see this in the broader political and social circumstances that an institution like the HZT takes place?
I think that is a great moment to hold it there, to leave us with those questions, because time.
Oh, I didn't realize I was taking the last comment, but you're welcome.